Marlene S. Mandapat. For nurturing their child, Sheila May S. Mandapat, Dean's Awardee of Class 2019 in a home environment where opportunities for learning are well attended to and the goals of education are reinforced by parents who are role models to their children. Given this 16th day of April 2019 at General De Jesus College. Signed, Mrs. Celia T. Martin, Registrar, Dean of the College of Education, Dr. Bernadette O. Gallardo, and Dr. Josefina P. Magno, President. Another Dean's Awardee from the Bachelor of Elementary Education, Ms. Jacqueline E. Santos, together with her parents. And the certificate of recognition also is awarded to Mr. Alfredo T. Santos and Mrs. Mary Grace E. Santos. This time, we will have our cum laude from the Bachelor of Elementary Education, Ms. CJ P. Anzures. Again, a certificate of recognition is given to Mr. Ramoncito R. Anzures and Mrs. Jennifer P. Anzures. And our magna cum laude, Mr. Mark Donovan S. Enriquez, together with his parents. Again, a certificate of recognition is awarded to Mr. Apollo V. Enriquez and Mrs. Marietta S. Enriquez for nurturing their child, Mark Donovan S. Enriquez, magna cum laude. May we request the Dean's Awardee from the Bachelor of Secondary Education. So the Dean's Awardee from the Bachelor of Secondary Education together with her parents, Miss Angelica K. M. Paz, Dean's Awardee. A certificate of recognition is awarded to Mr. Edgardo M. Paz Jr. and Mr. Edgardo M. Paz for nurturing their child, Angelica K. M. Paz, Dean's Award. Another Dean's Awardee, Ms. Ina Trinidad D. Victorio. A certificate of recognition is given to Mr. Maximino C. Victorio and Mrs. Trinidad S. Victorio. Another Dean's Awardee, Mr. Patrick Jerome M. Tino, together with his parents and sister. So a certificate of recognition is given to Mr. Virgilio M. Tino and Mrs. Corazon M. Tino. Next, Miss Arlene Cunanan, Dean's Awardee. A certificate of recognition is awarded to Mr. Armando C. Valdez and Mrs. Rufina M. Cunanan. Next is Mr. Joshua Philip B. M. Blanco, Dean's Awardee. Again, the certificate of recognition is awarded to Mr. Edgar G. Blanco and Mrs. Cecilia M. Blanco. is Mr. Jivan L. Simbilio, Dean's Awardee. Again, certificate of recognition is awarded to Mr. Augusto L. Simbilio and Mrs. Yolanda A. Simbilio. Next is Miss Angelica G. Bedrijo, Dean's Awardee. Certificate of recognition is awarded to Mr. Roberto R. A certificate of recognition is awarded to Mr. Albert M. Bedrijo and Ms. Angeline G. Bedrijo. And Mr. Matt Robert P. Lim, Dean's Awardee. Again, a certificate of recognition is awarded to Mr. Roberto R. Lim and Mrs. Charito P. Lim. This time, let us have the cum laudes. Miss Claudette B. De Guzman, cum laude. Certificate of recognition is awarded to Mr. Fernando D. De Guzman Jr. and Mrs. Corazon B. De Guzman. Next, we have Mr. John Derek P. Samin, cum laude. Certificate of recognition is awarded to Mr. Dario B. Samin and Mrs. Jennifer P. Samin. Next, we have Miss Crisel T. Franco, cum laude. A certificate of recognition is awarded to Miss Marnibet F. Cusio and Mrs. Elizabeth F. Franco. And we have Miss Aisel Marie B. Castro, cum laude. A certificate of recognition is awarded to Mr. Sotero Castro Jr. and Mrs. Melanie Castro. And our magna cum laude, Mr. John Carlo A. Reyes. A certificate of recognition is awarded to Mr. Ferdinand F. Reyes and Mrs. Josefina D. Reyes.
This time, let us help from the Bachelor of Business Administration, Miss Jeneline C. Magbitang, cum laude. General Business College awarded Certificate of Recognition to Mr. Severino M. Magbitang and Mrs. Arlene C. Magbitang for nurturing their child, Jeneline C. Magbitang.
This time for the Bachelor of Science in Hotel and Restaurant Management, Miss Leia Marie B. Magno, Dean's Awardee. Award the certificate of recognition to Mr. Leopoldo M. Magno and Mrs. Leia B. Magno. Miss Jemeline F. Jimenez, Dean's Awardee. Awardee Certificate of Recognition to Mr. Genaro B. Jimenez and Mrs. Melody F. Jimenez. And Miss Abigail V. Inbag, cum laude. Awardee Certificate of Recognition to Mr. Benigno F. Imbag and Mrs. Magdalena V. Imbag.
This time, the honor graduates from the Bachelor of Science in Accounting Technology. First, we have Alisa Camille J. Kaimo, Dean's Awardee. And this certificate of recognition is awarded to Mr. Johnny B. Kaimo and Mrs. Relisa Lucia J. Kaimo for nurturing their child. Alisa Camille J. Kaimo, Dean's Awardee. Next is Maria Crisel A. Trinidad, Dean's Awardee. And another certificate of recognition is awarded to Mr. Nestor B. Trinidad and Mrs. Rosie A. Trinidad. Let me call on Mr. Calvin Klein B. Pablo, Dean's Awardee. Another certificate of recognition is awarded to Mr. Ramon C. Pablo and Mrs. Rizal B. Pablo. Next is Miss Clarice Ann M. Salonga, Dean's Awardee. The certificate of recognition is awarded to Mr. Emmanuel S. Salonga and Mrs. Rufina M. Salonga. This time, let us have the honor graduates from the Bachelor of Science in Accountancy. First is Mr. Jacob C. Balagtas, Dean's Awardee. The certificate of recognition is also awarded to Mr. Nathaniel S. Balagtas and Mrs. Vilma C. Balagtas. Next is Miss Maricar D.C. Fernando, Dean's Awardee. And the certificate of recognition is awarded to Mr. Ricardo A. Fernando and Mrs. Lolita S. De La Cruz.